Welcome to the Magnificent Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top marketing experts in the world and keep you up to date on all the changes and best practices to help you grow your business and stay on the cutting edge. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Bernie Borges, who is the CEO of Find and Convert, a content marketing agency serving B2B clients across the U.S., propelling them to improve brand exposure and lead generation. He's a frequent speaker at marketing conferences and is the author of Marketing 2.0, one of the first 50 books written on social media strategy. He is also the executive producer of Social Business Engine, a digital media property with a weekly podcast. Bernie has been recognized by industry peers, including Marketing Insider's 60 Best Marketing Speakers, Top-Rank's Top 50 Content Marketing Influencers of 2016, Cizian's Top 50 Content Marketers on Twitter, and Brand Quarterly's Top 50 Over 50 Marketing Thought Leaders. And today, our topic is, should B2B salespeople be part of your social media plan? Bernie, how are you doing today?
Good, Dave. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Seen you speak many times, and I'm super stoked to have you on this podcast talking about a topic that is right in your wheelhouse and I know is a question many B2B companies have and a challenge many B2B companies have. So very excited to talk with you about this. But before we get into a lot of your good advice and tactics and strategy on some of this stuff, I first just want to have you just talk a little bit about, should B2B salespeople be concentrating on sales, or should they also be involved in a company's social media plan? And if so, do you have anything you can point to that validates this?
Sure. So the way you pose the question, Dave, should B2B salespeople be involved in a brand's social media? Short answer is yes. Then the next question is why and how. So let me address the why first. And it really stems from some pretty compelling data points, and I think a lot of people have seen these data points because they've been around for a little while now. Things like by the time a salesperson actually is even invited into a conversation with a prospect, anywhere from at the low end 60% and at the high end 90% of that prospective buyer's journey has been completed online. And Dave, what that means is that that person has a lot of predisposed perceptions and ideas. And so if a salesperson is getting into that conversation very late in that journey, then it might be difficult for that salesperson to build trust, credibility, authority, not only about himself or herself as a professional in the industry, but also about their brand, because that person may already be predisposed. Okay. Secondly, wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be even better if a salesperson can be invited into that conversation much earlier in the journey? So instead of being 70, 80, 90% of the way through the journey, what if a prospect invites you into a conversation 10 or 20% into that journey? How does that happen? Well, the way that happens is a B2B salesperson is very actively engaging in social channels, and the two predominant social channels are going to be LinkedIn and Twitter. Not limited to that, and we can talk about that later if you want, but if they're actively engaging through content, through comments, through group conversations, through being proactive, publishing articles, if they can write or if they can get help from marketing to write articles, and by publishing content that addresses the known needs and interests of their buyer, then they stand a greater chance of actually inserting themselves into the buyer's journey by being present, being discoverable for all the right reasons, because they are relevant and they're engaging. So if you address the why, like why should they, it's about trying to get into the buyer's journey as early as possible instead of waiting all the way down to that 70, 80, or 90% mark where the buyer is willing to have a conversation. So try to insert yourself earlier and then earn the right, earn the trust, earn the respect, earn the influence, be influential to that prospect's journey so that you can not only insert yourself into a conversation, but also have a meaningful conversation that allows you to actually become a serious consideration for that buyer.
Awesome. All right.
So let me pause right there and get your thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, yeah, no, I mean, you sold me on it. I mean, we've definitely heard, the numbers, and I think that they just, every time I hear the numbers, I believe that they're even increasing as far as how far along people are through the buying process, before they even reach out. So, people, so that's obviously, humongous. But you bring up some interesting points about actually trying to get in there at the 10, 15, 20, 30%, so that when they do reach that other stage, I mean, you're right there already. So that that makes logical, just without knowing anything about marketing or sales or any particular company or any particular product. Yeah, it just makes complete sense. Now, obviously, we're going to need to go into some specifics, and we'll get there. We'll get there. I kind of want to take it one step at a time as we walk the listeners through this journey. So you've definitely sold me on getting people, B2B people, not just dialing for dollars, but getting involved in a social plan. But in your experience, what have you seen? Like, what are some of the challenges? Because it makes too much sense, right? Of course you want this, right? So what are some of the challenges or roadblocks that you've seen that have prevented companies from getting their salespeople involved?
Sure. So I want to address that, but I do want to make one other point that I think is worth mentioning in terms of why do this, right? And that is that the vast majority of companies who have a social media presence, which at this point should be most companies, right? They have a social media presence behind their logo, right? Their logo has a Twitter account, probably has a Facebook page. They have a LinkedIn company page. It's all behind their logo, but the total reach of those brands, with the exception of large mega corporations, but, perhaps those exceptions aside, maybe, they don't have as much reach as they would if all of their employees collectively together, combined, participated. Yeah. That's another compelling reason, because collectively together, that brand can have a lot more reach into the marketplace if all of their employees were actively engaging. So I want to, speak to that as well, because it is another compelling reason, Dave, before we get into what some of the challenges are.
Yeah, okay. No, that is, I appreciate that. And that is super compelling. And yeah, I mean, I definitely want to talk about some of the challenges, but yeah, you bring up a fantastic point, and not just, and I assume you went past salespeople, right? You're talking about getting everybody in the company involved, because you're right. I mean, if everybody's involved, talk about free advertising and marketing, right? I mean, you don't get a better bang for your buck than free, and getting everybody involved like that, it's absolutely
well, and it's more than just the free factor. It's also the trust factor. So if you look at the annual Edelman Trust Barometer, that that says for at least the last 3 years in a row that the employee is the most trusted source of information about a brand over every other source of information, including trusted more than the CEO of a company. So the employee is the number one trusted source of information for a brand, and that comes from an independent body of research. You can look that up, the Edelman, Edelman, Edelman Trust Barometer. So, and also, Dave, I've always come from the school of, sales should not be limited to people who have sales in their title or in their full-time job description. Anybody that works for a brand that, likes the company they work for and they believe in the company's products and services, they should have some willingness to advocate for that brand. Now, I'd love to get to your question about the challenges, because there are some very common challenges and some pretty significant challenges that we should talk about. You ready to go there?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. But I do want to clarify one thing that you said that really struck me, that it's interesting to me. You said that with the Edelman Trust Barometer report that the employees are the most trusted source. Is that even over peer reviews and customer reviews, or are you referencing like within a particular company, be it the brand or the CEO or the vice president, that, you know, I'm just curious to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, within a company, the employees themselves are the most trusted source of information. So more than the logo, meaning what comes out of PR and communications, you know, what comes out of the media, what comes out of the CEO, it's the actual employees themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's an awesome point. You know, for anybody, you know, any owner of a company that's listening to this, I mean, that right then and there needs to, you know, open some eyes that how important this is, because they could be. I mean, granted, you do want them involved, obviously, but they might have thought that, hey, what they're saying is, you know, the shiznit and whatever, you know, the number one, you know, voice from their company, but in reality, they're not. That's really interesting. Great point, Bernie. Yeah, let's move on to some roadblocks, because I can't imagine a scenario where an owner or CEO or something wouldn't want this to happen, right? I mean, it just seems too logical. But so there must be challenges that happen. So let's dig into that so we can talk about overcoming.
Okay. So the challenges that I've experienced in my own agency with our own clients, as well as what we see in general across the total landscape, as you know, I look at the industry and I look at as many examples as I can possibly study are the following. Number one, getting salespeople to nod their head around the why, Dave, meaning that they understand why they should get involved, why they should engage in social media. So that is number one, that they need to understand the why. And if you think about the logic behind that, there aren't too many things we do in life if we don't understand the why, right? You don't go to the gym if you don't understand the why. You don't donate to a charity if you don't, like if you're not behind that charity. I mean, there's everything in life that we do it because we understand the why. And so it starts with that. And in fact, hey, Simon Sinek wrote a book on that whole thing, right? Start with why. So salespeople need to understand part of what I described earlier, that B2B buyers are only going to talk to you late in the journey. And by the way, here's another point that I didn't make earlier, and so I don't mean to digress, but I also didn't make the point that if a salesperson isn't engaging and isn't inserting himself or herself into the buyer's journey, well, then there's a chance you may not ever get into that buyer's journey, because in their research, they basically exclude you. They've eliminated you for good or bad, right or wrong reason, right? So there's a good reason, right? There's a why right there. There's a reason for salespeople to want to be engaged so that they can maximize the probability of inserting themselves into the buyer's journey that they want to reach, right? Okay. So, and it's also inserting themselves not just from the standpoint of being discovered, but also by discovering when there is a sales process taking place. You can do competitive research on social channels, and you can uncover. One of my podcast episodes actually showcased a B2B sales professional who gives an example where he was doing some really good, quote-unquote, social listening. He observed that one of his prospects, a company that was on his radar, was engaging with one of his competitors. He watched what that engagement looked like online. He was able to kind of put two and two together. He reached out to that prospect, and he sort of confronted him in a professional way and say, I understand that you're considering, this topic. And the prospect agreed, admitted yes, and he was able to start a sales conversation, and he eventually won that business. And it all gets attributed back to he was doing good social listening, and he observed an online conversation that was happening between a prospect and a competitor.
How did he observe that?
Through Twitter. Following a hashtag stream. Just following a hashtag stream on a topic, within his industry, and he saw an exchange, and that exchange immediately, lit a little flag for him, like, okay, that's a prospect, that's a competitor, I need to dig into this. He did, and, that's what happened. That's how we learned about it. Yeah. So, So, it starts with the why, right? Like Simon Sinek says, it starts with the why. So if we can get B2B salespeople to understand why they need to be engaged. Now, The other part of this is that the other part of the challenge, if you will, is that no matter how you slice it, Dave, there is some training involved. And basically, there's kind of two camps of sales professionals that I've observed in the time that I've been doing this with clients. There's either experienced sales professionals who have, again, they have experience, they understand B2B relationship building, they've been doing it for 10 or more years. They understand that, but they don't understand how to engage in social media for sales development, for business development, right? Or there's the younger sales professional who's social media savvy but doesn't have lots, they don't have 10 or more years experience like the more seasoned salesperson. The common denominator is that they need to learn a certain basic foundation of skills around how to harness social media technology and social strategy to uncover conversations like the example that I shared with you, as well as to engage in conversations, engage in content sharing, and be discoverable by the prospective buyer. So there is some level of training that has to happen, and that's another challenge, is that a lot of brands are often unwilling to invest in that training. I mean, I've seen so many times, and unfortunately I've been part of it, where I've been engaged to come in to do what I call a one and done, and honestly, they're frustrating because you get brought in for a day and you do a workshop and people are all excited, but the reality is you don't really influence or affect behavior change in one day. No. There needs to be an ongoing coaching program. And whether that's done with an external resource, I'm not here to, pitch and say it should be someone like me or you. It can be someone internal, but it's got to be ongoing. There's got to be an ongoing coaching and accountability program that is continually reinvesting in the skills development and the change behavior that has to happen. And it really is about change behavior. Or actually, I'm saying it backwards, behavior change, same thing. But if people don't change the way they go about the process of finding opportunities, engaging in those opportunities, following up on those opportunities, and building their own trust and influence with prospective buyers, if that behavior doesn't become what I call habit, Dave, it needs to be habit. I call it, working that new muscle, and I always single out the calf muscle, right? So if you've never worked the calf muscle before and all of a sudden you do some activity and you work the calf muscle, it's pretty sore until you continually work that calf muscle, and eventually the soreness goes away and it's routine, it's habit, and it's no longer sore. So this is behavior change. And so people need to get past that soreness. It needs to be habit and natural.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're being very modest, and you say, use, if it's me or somebody else. Well, let's talk about you. If unless this is going to go down, a 30-minute conversation all by itself, and if that's the case, we can save it for another time. But can you speak about how you would go about training? Because you obviously would be a great person to learn from on this, or to have trained. What are some good pointers you can give to set up, the training aspect? Because it does seem, obviously, the why is it is the most important thing, but I also think it might be probably the easier than the training aspect of it, or at least people will have an understanding of how to go about that in their own company. But the training part, I think, leaves there's a lot of questions. So can you speak on that a little bit, or is that just too long to dig into that?
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I can certainly be brief about that, because in my experience, what we've figured out is a process that works pretty well, and that is a lecture-style event that usually runs around 90 minutes. Now, when I say lecture, I mean it's interactive, but it's basically, about a 90-minute presentation. Again, very interactive, but it is designed to address the why. It is designed to get people to nod their head and say, I get it. Yeah, I'm excited. I want to go to the next level. So it starts there. Okay. Then after that, typically what we do is we start working with either smaller groups of 3 to 5 people or one-on-one. And we get into very specific account scenarios. And then typically, not less than 3 of those sessions, so that in each session, you continue to make progress. So in the first session, you identify an account, you identify some goals, you identify some people, and you identify a game plan. And that alone is a session. And then you regroup 2, 3, 4 weeks later, and you just kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper, so that, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, whatever it may be, coaching sessions later, you just continually make progress on the deals that they're working on. That's kind of the long and short of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How often do you suggest having these, lecture-style events within your company?
Well, typically the lecture-style event is a one-timer, unless it's for different groups of people, right? So it's a one-time event for a group of people to really, because it's focused on the why. So you do that once. Right? And sometimes you do it for salespeople, and then I can do a different version for executives, do that in 30 minutes, and kind of get, them to also nod their head and go, yep, we get this. But yeah, it's usually a one-time event for a group of people.
Awesome. All right, cool. We've talked about the why. You mentioned there was 3 things. We talked about the why. We talked about training and a final roadblock that you've seen or pointed on a roadblock.
Yeah, and that's focused on the wrong thing, focused on the tactic of being on social. So, for example, a very common question that I get all the time is, okay, so I get why. So tell me, how much time should I allocate for this on a daily basis? My answer is always the same. And my answer is, that's not the question I want to answer. It's the wrong question. Let's not talk about how much time you should spend. Let's talk about what your goal is and what your strategy is. And then once we identify your goal, so for example, pretty common goal is, here's a company that's a target. I know it's a company that, I can sell to, meaning, they probably need what we sell. So the goal is to get into this company. So we need to either identify who the people are. If we know who they are, we need to find a way to get to them and generate a meeting or a call with them so that they'll listen to us, that they'll, want to talk to us. So then we have to put a plan in place. And we frequently put a plan in place on the path to the buyer. So sometimes the buyer might be a C-level person, difficult to get to. So we have to find the path to that buyer. Who are the people that influence that individual? Let's identify who they are, and let's put a strategy in place to be able to engage with those people, to build some relationships with some of those people, because we're probably not going to build relationships with all of them, and then find the one or the ones that eventually might be the one that can open the door to the ultimate buyer, the ultimate decision maker that we need to get to. And so that might be a 3 or 6 month plan. So how much time do you do that on a daily basis? Well, it all comes back to your strategy. So first map out the strategy and then determine, okay, I can do 30 minutes a day, I can do 10 minutes a day, whatever it might be. But what happens, Dave, is that each and every time, to a person, 100% of the time, what they find is that their mind shifts from, I can spend 30 minutes doing this, to, oh, I've just had contact with this individual, and they get excited. So now they're thinking about the next step on that individual. And it's not about watching the clock like, oh, I only have 10 minutes left, because that has nothing to do with it. It's about, I just contacted this person. They're on the path to the buyer. Now I need to strategize on what my next step is with this person to build a relationship with them on the way to the buyer. And then the whole thought goes out the window of how much time do I spend, because they're on a journey now. They're on a mission to reach that ultimate buyer.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I just want to kind of just move on to, you've got me all fired up about this stuff. No, I want to move on to talk about some ideas. You've mentioned, the mapping the strategy and, engage with them, move them along the buyer's process and all of that. And it's not just theory, but in theory, it sounds fantastic. But now let's talk specifics if you can,
Tactics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I would like some for maybe, I don't know if there's beginners or advanced or whatever. I guess we'll move, start from, some easy, low-hanging fruit to, okay, now here are some advanced things and tactics you can do. So take it away. I'd like to, maybe hear you tell some stories or tactics or whatever, if you want to, just go for it. I want to hear it. I want to learn from you.
All right, cool. All right, so just a few tactics that are very doable. Pretty much, anyone can do it. And if you think you can't, I often say, Dave, that this stuff isn't rocket science. You just have to go do it, and you'll figure out pretty quickly that it's not rocket science. You just need to really just develop the mindset and get into the habit of doing it. So for anybody that's new at it, just remember, it's not rocket science. So here's a couple of things. First of all, start with some simple basics. If the person or the people that you ultimately need to get to are on LinkedIn or Twitter, or start following them. Now, you may not be able to connect with them on LinkedIn if they don't accept your invitation. And by the way, there's no reason not to send them an invitation to connect on LinkedIn, even if they're your ultimate buyer. But personalize the invitation. Make it about them. Study them. What have they done recently that you can mention in your invitation? Hey, I saw that you recently published this paper, spoke at this conference, won this award, got this promotion, whatever it might be, Give them. Everybody likes to get complimented. Everybody. So give them a little compliment. Be authentic. Be real. And then here's my little tip here, Dave. This is my little secret sauce. It works pretty well. At the end of my LinkedIn invitation, I always say I would be honored to connect with you on LinkedIn. I use the word honored very intentionally, and I also say connect. I don't say add you to my network, because if I say that, that's very self-serving. Hey, I want to add you to my network, or I want to be in your network. Either one of those is self-serving. I always end the personal note with, I'd be honored to connect with you on LinkedIn. Now, whether or not they accept your invitation, you can do the same with other people in an account, but you can also follow someone on LinkedIn. There's a little drop-down arrow right next to the connect button on LinkedIn. Click on that drop-down arrow and click on follow. So even if you're not connected to them, whatever they post, you will see, because now you're following them on LinkedIn. On Twitter, you can obviously do the same.
Real quick, Marty, I've seen that. That's something that I haven't done. I've seen it. I mean, I've followed some people. What happens when you follow? Like, where does that feed into? I mean, can it be into like a Hootsuite or LinkedIn? Where would people see what happens once they follow somebody?
It's in your LinkedIn feed. They get a notification that you've followed them, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Well, I guess they could block you if they wanted to, but I think that's pretty. It's
well, that's good.
As long as you give them a reason to.
Yeah, well, the only getting a no is sometimes as happy as getting a yes. So that'll get you that no real quick.
Yeah, that's true. But I that's probably the exception. Unless you've given them a reason to block you, it shouldn't happen. In general. So you can follow them on LinkedIn, and obviously you can follow them on Twitter as well. So I did a video podcast, because I have a video channel called Poolside Sales Chat. I live in Florida, and I do record a video by my pool sometimes on Friday afternoons. I keep it short, 7 or so minutes, and I did one episode on what's the difference between following someone and stalking someone. And I basically make the comment that, there's a fine line. But if you follow someone online with enough consistency, you can learn what's important to them. Now, obviously, they have to be reasonably active for you to follow them online. And if they're not, then you have to find other people through LinkedIn. LinkedIn tells you, people also viewed or people similar to, so that can give you insight into other people that you might want to follow or connect with on LinkedIn that might be influential to the person that you ultimately need to reach. But by following them, if they're active at some level, you can retweet their stuff, not every day, all day, because that is stalking and that is annoying, but selectively retweet their stuff. If they're posting on LinkedIn, you can like their stuff, but more importantly, add a comment. And I mean an intelligent comment, not great article, because that's not intelligent. Read the article that they shared or wrote, and write a comment that proves to them that you read it. Now you are demonstrating some true engagement, authentic engagement. And by the way, Dave, this takes a little time, right? To click on an article and read it and then write a comment, you're talking probably minimum 5 minutes, probably more than 5 minutes. Maybe 10, maybe 15. Depends on how fast a reader and how fast a writer you are on a comment, etc. So by engaging with people, by either connecting with them or following them on LinkedIn, commenting on stuff if they're active on LinkedIn, retweeting their stuff if they're active on Twitter. Now, if they're invisible, if they they're on LinkedIn, but they haven't done anything recently, they're not on Twitter, that kind of thing, that's a little more challenging, and that's where you have to really find other people that are on the path to your buyer, meaning they are people who can be influential to the person you need to get to. And admittedly, that creates more of a challenge. But, you asked for some tactics, so I want to share, what some of these fairly simple tactics might be. Now, one that's just a little more advanced, not terribly, but a little bit, is to send someone an InMail. You're familiar with InMail? On LinkedIn? Yeah. So InMail, for anybody that may not be familiar with it, is basically sending someone an email, but you're doing it within LinkedIn. So I guess that's probably why they call it InMail, right? You're inside of LinkedIn. Yeah. I don't know. I'm guessing that. And so what LinkedIn does is, first of all, you have to buy credits, so it's not free. So you buy credits to send people InMail. You get X amount of, InMail messages per X amount of credits. Pricing changes all the time. I don't know what it is. So you can send anyone an InMail. You and I can send an InMail to Bill Gates. LinkedIn is going to guarantee delivery of the InMail you and I send to Bill Gates. Whether or not he opens it or reads it, that's another story. But you and I can send an InMail to anybody on LinkedIn. So if you craft an InMail with a catchy subject line, something that is about them, something that is, again, going to get their attention, and it's about them. And then in your InMail, structure it in a way that is valuable to them and gets to the point fairly quickly. If you can reference someone else, like if I was sending an InMail to someone and you and I were the common denominator, I might reference you. Hey, I'm a friend of Dave's, and here's why I'm reaching out to you. Dave suggested, or whatever the case may be. If you can do that, that's great. That's a great way to open a door if you can reference someone else, or if you can reference anything else that might be that bridge between you and them. Sometimes, if you're trying to reach someone that's really hard to reach, you might just ask for their approval to contact someone within their organization, or maybe forward this to someone within their organization. So sending an InMail, regardless of what you ask for, is another tactic, Dave, that is something for people to think about. And it's a numbers game. If you send enough of them that are well written, that's, again, well thought out, you can, I had a meeting with a CEO not too long ago, not of a big company, but nonetheless CEO of a 400-person company who met with me based on an InMail that I sent. And now I've got some conversations that have started. So, it's a numbers game, but it's let me tell you, it's a whole lot higher probability of achieving a meeting through an InMail than a cold call.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and like to get your advice on, after you connect with somebody, because, how quickly, InMail, obviously, you might come if you're not connected with them, obviously. But I have to buy for our company, and I do take sales calls, and I do, but as we all know, it's not at the top of our priority list, right? But I will for, when people approach me actually the way that you mentioned. But I also do get really turned off when somebody connects with me, and then that day or the next day I get this sales email, I'm like, whoa. Yeah. Take it easy. We just connected. Yeah. Do you feel that same way, and have you experienced the same, thought from your end?
Absolutely, Dave. Absolutely, yes. So the next step after you connect with someone, in general, is to serve that person, be useful to that person, be good to that person, be kind to that person, be thoughtful to that person. All the things that we were taught by mom as a kid. So how do you do that? Well, you can compliment them on a recent achievement. You can send them articles that you think will be relevant to them, and never ask for anything in return. Hey, I came across this article based on, what I think I know of your professional interest. I thought you might find it interesting. Have a nice day.
Perfect. I mean, that right there. Let me just stop and say, hey, everybody, listen to what Bernie just said, because that right there is how you can be helpful. It's simple as that, and leave it at that at the same time. Go ahead.
Exactly. And then I have this little formula, and it's not all that scientific. It's not even black and white, but I call it the 5-touch formula. And basically, so let's say you were a prospect, Dave. My goal is I'm going to touch you 5 times before I think about asking for something of you. And by asking, maybe asking for a phone conversation or something like that. Now, I said at the beginning of this that it's not a black and white formula. When I say 5, that's kind of a rule of thumb. It might be 15. I'm always going to use a judgment call. If I don't feel like, there's been enough relevant digital touch points at 5 or 7 or 10, I'm not going to do it. I want to feel confident that they're going to say yes when I ask for a call or a meeting or a referral or something to that effect, right? But I generally say, as a rule of thumb, in most cases, it takes at least 5. So salespeople have to be patient and persistent. And by persistent, I don't mean, touch someone 5 times in one day, right? Use common sense, right?
Sure. And that's the parameters you got to give salespeople. You set them up, but then they have to use their brains. Because you can't just set up a one-size-fits-all. You give them these tools, and but use them at the right time. Use this content at the right time. So you got to use your brain. And to circle back real quick on a question that I had, just on some logistic stuff, but you mentioned following on LinkedIn. I know on Twitter you can create special feeds. You can call them, whatever. Don't name them prospects, because they'll see that they're added to the list of prospects. So, use a better word than that. You could say expert CEOs or something like that. But so you can do that, and then you can create a stream, and you can follow people that way without, it getting involved in all the other people you follow, and then you never see what they say. Is there something similar on LinkedIn that you have found where it doesn't get lost in the clutter, that you can put people in a section where you can reference, and it's only those people that you see in a stream?
Yeah, so the stream that you just mentioned is for Twitter. So the way to do something similar to that on LinkedIn, it's not an apples to apples. It's not a stream as it is on Twitter, where you can create a list of people, add people to that list. And by the way, that list can be public or private. So if you create a list called Hot Prospects and it's public, and you add someone to it, they're going to get a notification that they've just been added to your list called Hot Prospects, right? But you could create that list, and if you want to call it Hot Prospects, and make it private, which means nobody sees it but you. And you can still follow anybody you put on that stream, but it's private and you're the only one who sees it.
Okay.
Now, quick little tip on that is I like to create lists that are flattering. So let's say I create a list that says, smartest marketers I know, and I add you to that list. Most people are going to feel pretty good. Like, hey, I just got added to a list, smartest marketers I know, that kind of thing, right? So, but on LinkedIn, there's no apples to apples, but what you can do is you can do an advanced search and then save it. And it's private. It's only available to you. It's your search. So if you want to do a search on, say, VPs of sales, in the state of Michigan, or within a company, or probably not a lot of VPs of sales within one company, but, within an industry or whatever, right? You can do a custom search, and then whatever results you get, you can save that and then go back and visit that. And I actually include that in some of the training that we do, because oftentimes when you're doing what I call account mining, targeted account mining, you might build a list of people. They're not C-level people, because that's not a big list, right? But it might be people with certain keywords in their profile. That list might have 200 people on it. So you gotta save that list and then chip away at that list little by little by, reaching out to those people maybe one a day, something that's manageable from a time standpoint. But that's a saved list, and it's private to you only.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. Yeah, let's keep going. Do you have some other pointers, tactics you'd like to give, and some things that you've seen work well?
I think in the context of a podcast like this, I think, those are the big ones. I mean, the only other one that I would add is, and I know that in my travels, I've not come across too many salespeople that like to write, but if you like to write and you write pretty well, I mean, in terms of like grammatically speaking, you can write well and you can make a point, then write and publish on LinkedIn. Or if you have a blog, then take your blog articles and repurpose them on LinkedIn as a published article, because those articles get anybody who is following you or connected to you on LinkedIn is going to see, whether or not they see it, they get a notification that you've published an article. And then, of course, you can share it. You can share it not only on LinkedIn, but on Twitter. And it's just a way for you to demonstrate your knowledge, your expertise, your thought leadership. So, that's maybe a little bit more advanced. It kind of depends on where you fall into, the camp of, are you a writer or not a writer? And in some organizations, Dave, the marketing department will actually help salespeople write, but I haven't seen a lot of that because it's resource intensive. But, I've seen where maybe a small number of salespeople say, yes, I want to publish articles. So it's a manageable number. They might draft an outline. Maybe somebody in marketing, helps kind of coaches them on the main point, and they go through a little bit of an edit process, and then they publish it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you can always share your company, whatever they're putting out, share that on LinkedIn with your network, right? I mean,
yep.
You definitely can do that. Okay,
Absolutely.
Cool. Now, we talked a little bit about some things that B2B salespeople should not do. You've talked a lot about what they should be doing. Is there any other, big, do nots to think about that you've seen some big mistakes and common mistakes being made out there, social, in regards to them being social?
Well, as you said, Dave, we've talked about a few already, and I think it's worth just reviewing a few of them. But one that I'll point out is that, unfortunately, sometimes sales managers who themselves don't understand social selling best practices, and in fact, they misunderstand it. They think that social media, and LinkedIn in particular, is a place to go and actually hit people up and pitch and that kind of thing. And so sometimes sales managers or business owners mandate to their salespeople, hey, blanket everybody with this pitch, or take, this paragraph and publish it as an article on your LinkedIn profile when, in fact, it's not an article, it's a pitch, So, unfortunately, sometimes when salespeople are doing that, they're doing it because they're forced by their boss. And that's a really bad practice, and I cringe when I see that, and I just feel really sorry for those salespeople. Because the other point behind that is that whether a company wants to admit it or not, but a LinkedIn profile is owned by the individual, not by the company. Now, there is a shared responsibility because the messaging associated with the company description, is messaging that should be owned by the company. So there's some sharing, but the actual profile is owned by the individual. So just to kind of recap that, no company or boss should ever mandate to their salespeople what to say or what to do. Now, they can coach, they can guide, and using best practices that we've discussed here today, empower their sales staff to do the things that we've discussed here today, but they should never mandate them to pitch and, do hard-hitting selling on social. The other things that we've already really touched on, what you just said, don't pitch someone really hard, kind of the obvious ones. The rule of thumb is if you wouldn't do it at a cocktail party, don't do it on LinkedIn or online. You know what I mean? If you're at a cocktail party and you're having a conversation with someone, intuitively not to pitch them, not within the first 30 seconds or even the first 5 minutes. I mean, maybe 2 hours into a conversation, it's the end of the night and you've had a great conversation, and then all of a sudden there's a natural moment, that says, hey, can we talk further, next week or something? And it's natural. That's exactly how it should happen online. It should be a natural moment where both people are ready for it,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I've never heard anybody talk about it like that. But yeah, I mean, just think about it. You don't do that, so don't do it here, because we're all people behind titles and screens and everything. I mean, we're still the same human beings that you interact with, so follow the same human laws. Now you mentioned, and I'm glad we kind of, circle back to the don'ts, because you did bring up a very unique one, but it's mainly for, managers and CEOs and stuff that are forcing people to use it incorrectly. So don't do that. But what have you seen any companies successfully motivate? I know we went through earlier how to set everything up, explain the why. I mean, just to get them going, period. But like an ongoing motivation of it. Have you seen any fun examples out there? They're like, man, that company really has it down and they're doing XYZ. Does anything come to mind in regards to motivation?
So a couple come to mind, and actually I've been asked not to share their names because it's part of their strategy, right? So they don't want to give away their strategy. But the way that they've trained their people is through really the best practices we've discussed, which simply stated is it's ongoing and it's modular. And by modular, I mean they kind of go through phases where, phase one is about getting people to just understand the value of their profile and how to have a profile on LinkedIn that's buyer-centric, meaning that it's written from the lens of the customer and not written from the lens of here's my resume and what a great employee I am and here's all the things I've accomplished. So really starting out with the phase of let's get people to make sure that their presence on LinkedIn is through the lens of the customer, and that alone is behavior change. And then there needs to be some adoption period for that, Dave. It's not in one day or even 1 week, right? So that can be a phase. And then another phase is about engagement. Here's how to engage and how to engage effectively. And here's different ways and examples and groups to join and how you can start a conversation, how you can engage in a conversation, how you can share content in a way that's relevant and meaningful and builds your own trust and influence. So just the whole, engagement phase can be, another X number of weeks of just ongoing examples and coaching, and then there's, deals. Okay, so here's an account. There's 3 of us in a company that can sell into this account. Let's put a strategy in place. This is going to be a 90-day plus strategy. So here's the steps. Here's kind of the general timeline that we've mapped out. So it's a multi-phase approach, not a one and done, not a one lecture, not a one course, not a one anything. It's a multi-phase approach that management invests in, and by invest in, I mean it's an ongoing program. Whether it's done through external resources or internal resources, it doesn't matter. What matters is that there's a program in place that is, multi-phase and takes some time over the span of months, not days or just a few weeks.
Okay. Now, in regards to that, managing those efforts, without being a micromanager and looking over the shoulder of anybody, or how have you seen in it? And this might just go hand in hand with this, ongoing program of just talking things out. But have you seen some good ways people have managed those efforts rather than just saying, "Did you do it?" Or maybe that's what you do. I don't know. Or you share stories or whatnot. But do you have any insight there?
So a couple thoughts. One is just good old-fashioned diligence and persistence and good old-fashioned human-to-human coaching, getting with people. I mean, even in my own experience, I've had so many conversations with people one-on-one where one-on-one they're willing to share their concerns, their frustrations, their fears. They're willing to share what they don't know, that these are things that they're unwilling to share in a group setting or with their boss, right? So ongoing coaching and support that just allows people to kind of break through those insecurities, those walls, if you will, right? And then from a technology standpoint, there's two types of tools. There's the LinkedIn Navigator tool itself, which is a LinkedIn tool where the manager can have some visibility into the team in terms of their activity. And then there's also employee advocacy tools that gives you the ability to kind of see in the aggregate how people are sharing and engaging. So these are tools like GaggleAMP, Everyone Social, Dynamic Signal, PeopleLinks, Trapit. I think I just named 4, right? Just to throw 4 technology platforms out there as the kind of tools that I'm referencing that are tools that can be used by not just salespeople, but employees in general. But I mean, in this conversation, we're focused on salespeople. So it can give the managers some leverage, and by leverage, probably not the right word, more along the lines of awareness of who's doing what in terms of engagement and activity.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you've really outlined a nice plan, Bernie. Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing effort, and then, the management and the training, sound like they could go hand in hand at those same meetings and just have people share their, overcome those fears and any challenges that they're having and hear how it's working well for others. And then once they start seeing other people close sales because of it, well, talk about motivation. There you go, right?
Yeah.
And then they'll buy in. So, yeah, and a lot of people want to skate around and not, in this digital age, it gets lost that humans are very important still. And, the management techniques from, all the experts out there who've, talked from the, 1970s, 80s, 90s, a lot of those, they still apply. There's still psychological and social, things that you just need to manage, and you need to have conversations, and you need to have diligence. You need to talk to your people. You need to bring all that out. So I really appreciate you driving that home because that's going to be involved here in order for them to use the digital stuff, right? Awesome. So finally here, just any parting thoughts as far as what you see the future holds in this area, any potential big prediction you might have?
So 2 thoughts on that, Dave. One is less of a prediction, although I will get to the prediction. If you look at the last 150 years, there's 3 technology innovations that really dominate the last 150 years. The telephone, email, and social media. And the telephone is still with us. Email is still with us. And social media is mainstream and not, new as it was in 2008, 9, 10. It's mainstream. So, you can't deny, you can't not use a telephone, you can't not use email. And so all I really say is you can't not use social properly, as long as it's used properly. So ignoring it is highly risky. So that's one point. In terms of predictions, that's easy. I've never been so confident in being able to make a prediction as I am now. And that is the adoption of artificial intelligence, AI-powered software that is going to make parts of what we do in B2B sales, B2B marketing and B2B sales more efficient and easier. And I see a day in the not very distant future where software is going to do what I call matchmaking. So what I mean by that is a B2B prospective buyer or buyers are going to engage with a brand's digital stuff, right? Could be website, could be tweets, could be LinkedIn, could be anything online. And through AI-powered technology, people inside of the selling organization are going to be identified as the best match to actually do the follow-up and not just automatically turn to the salesperson because it's their territory, but rather match them up with somebody inside the selling organization who's a really good match for any number of reasons, and do the actual connection and the outreach to them. And then eventually, through nice dashboards and, again, really awesome technology, the salesperson can orchestrate the deal and make sure that, it can be closed, but they're not necessarily always the one doing the contact.
Interesting, Bernie. I've not
look out for that
yet. I've heard, AI and blah blah blah, but yeah, that's a first. So, and you give that to me at the end of the podcast. We're gonna have to do another one, Bernie. We're gonna have to do another one.
So you know what? You should do a pop quiz and ask someone. So if you can point out Bernie's prediction of the future, that'll prove that someone actually listened to the end of the podcast.
Right. But I definitely am going to have this on our radar to talk about in the future, because that is interesting. Well, Bernie, this has been a real pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. How can people continue to learn from you?
Well, I appreciate it, Dave, and I've enjoyed it myself. My company is FindAndConvert.com. My podcast is Social Business Engine, which is, socialbusinessengine.com. And my name is Bernie Borges, pretty Googleable, easy to find.
Okay, and at Twitter, just for the listeners, it's BernieBorges. All right, Bernie, really appreciate your time and your insight and all your great advice, and until next time.
Thanks, Dave. Enjoyed it.